Let's go, babies. Game time. I am the Atheist Killer, the Ferrari of philosophy, the author of the greatest philosophical work of all time, TEA, better known as the Elliott Argument. I'm also the founder of Theistic Essentialism. I'm going to be live for about another 20 minutes. If you have any questions, please feel free to request to join in the box. Come on up, and you can ask me as many questions as you'd like. Today, for the next few minutes, we're going to be talking about the balloon argument. Another one of my works, which you may or may not be familiar with. So, again, while we're going over this, if you have any questions, feel free to put them down in the comments or request to join and come on up. So, let's go over the argument first. If you see it in the background, it reads, "The Christian God is emotional, while the greatest conceivable being is emotionless." Premise number 2. If the Christian God existed, it would be contingent on the greatest conceivable being as a necessary foundation for it to have emotions. Conclusion: the Christian God's existence is contingent on the existence of the greatest conceivable being. So first, let us talk about premise number 1. The Christian God, of course, as we all know, has emotions. He interacts and he changes. The greatest conceivable being, on the other hand, the God of Theistic Essentialism, is immutable, emotionless, and is unaffected by any outside or external sources. So what this means is the Christian God is experiencing changing internal states, while the greatest conceivable being is immutable, impassible, perfect, lacking nothing. Conceivable being is immutable, impassible, perfect, lacking nothing, necessary, cannot be affected by any outside or external source, etc. Now, please remember, emotions are change because they're reactivity, desire, deficiency, dissatisfaction. So if a being gained an emotion, that means it lacked something before, which means it was imperfect. And if it loses an emotion, then it changed, which means it's not immutable. And if it reacts, then that means it's affected by something else or something external, which means it's not fully independent or sovereign. Now let's talk about premise number 2 real quick, because most people agree with premise number 1. First of all, what we need to do here is, let us again go over premise number 2. It reads, if the Christian God existed, it would be contingent on the greatest conceivable being as a necessary foundation for it to have emotions. All right, so first things first, we need to talk about the nature of emotions. Okay? Emotions involve reactions to stimuli, often based on preferences, desires, and perceptions of good and bad. For a being to have emotions, there must first be a dynamic interaction between that being and the world around it. The Christian God, right, from the Bible, does have emotions such as love, wrath, jealousy, regret, sorrow, etc., which shows and proves he reacts to events, people, and situations. This is a form of dependency. Dependency on something external outside of oneself. But again, the greatest conceivable being, the God of Theistic Essentialism, is emotionless. He has no emotional fluctuations. He does not undergo any changes. Again, he's immutable and does not respond to any external stimuli. Next, let us talk about the contingency of emotions. Emotions actually presuppose an imperfection or change in a being, because external factors would provoke a response. The Christian God is therefore interacting with and affected by the external world or factors outside of himself. But the God of theistic essentialism, the greatest conceivable being, on the other hand, is necessary. So what that means is, if the Christian God can have emotions, that means that some kind of external reality must be in place to allow any type of emotional engagement. The God of theistic essentialism would therefore be the one necessary non-contingent being that laid the foundation for any and all beings who have emotions to exist. If the God of theistic essentialism did not exist, the Christian God would lack the groundwork and necessary framework for emotions to emerge logically and coherently. The God of theistic essentialism represents perfection and immutability. Right? That's why the greatest conceivable being would therefore be the ultimate cause and sustainer of all lesser beings. Without a being of perfection as a reference, a being like the Christian God would lack the logical coherence of emotional response, because those responses require external stimuli, limitations, and imperfections, which the God of theistic essentialism cannot possess. Therefore, the Christian God's emotions depend on the existence of the greatest conceivable being. Again, the Christian God's emotions depend on the existence of the greatest conceivable being. Moving right along, the Christian God's emotions involve change, okay, reaction, and dependence. Traits which require a metaphysical framework more foundational than itself. More foundational than himself, meaning more foundational than the Christian God. Without the God of theistic essentialism grounding existence, no being, especially one with emotional fluctuations, could ever exist. Because emotions mean you're changing because of something else or external to you. Like getting sad when someone disappoints you. Right? For a God to have these type of emotions, there would have to be something bigger that makes it possible for changing things like feelings and emotions to even exist. So now what we're going to do is we are going to talk about a example known as the balloon floating in the air example. The CG is the Christian God versus the GCB, which is the greatest conceivable being, or the God of theistic essentialism. So this is in fact why we call this the balloon argument. Okay? Let's talk about a balloon floating in air. Okay? The balloon moves when the wind blows. It changes directions. It goes up and down, it spins around, etc. But you have to ask yourself, what makes the balloon move like this? Well, it's the air and the wind around it. Okay, it has space. The balloon can't move on its own without something bigger and more stable already existing. There has to be a framework and a grounding, meaning the balloon's movement is contingent. And just like the balloon needs air to move, a God with emotions needs something bigger, steady, and unchanging to ground any possibilities. The Christian God is not the GCB. The Christian God is weak and pathetic and has emotions and changes and is not immutable and interacts with his creation. Next, let's imagine a boat floating on the ocean. Okay, picture a boat floating on the ocean. The boat rocks, it moves, it bobs up and down because of the waves. But can waves in the ocean exist without the ocean? No. Because waves are a change in motion and only happen because of the ocean. meaning they are contingent. The Christian God's emotions are like waves, always changing. But the emotional waves can only happen if there's an ocean grounding them and supporting them, meaning something non-contingent, steady, and unchanging. Now, even if the Christian God didn't have emotions at first, for example, let's say he didn't have any emotions prior to creation and only got them later after creating the universe, or creating the air in this example, or the space where he changes, or with the space where he has emotions, etc., he would still have to change from an emotionless state to an emotional state. It'd be like a basketball player who always had the ability to dunk a basketball, but he never dunks a basketball until he actually sees a basketball hoop. Okay? That basketball player would have changed from a potential dunker to an actual dunker. But if God's emotional states went from unexpressed to expressed, or from potential to actual, that would be a real change inside of his eternal framework. His internal experience and state of being would have been incomplete until creation. Therefore, not metaphysically perfect, as he depends on creation to fully be what he is. Now, I want to remind you of one last thing. Withholding a timeless intention to create the universe and then creating it is vastly different than changing an essential aspect of one's eternal nature and personhood. For example, going from a non-emotional state to an emotional state. Request to join, get a box, come on up and let's talk about it. Now we got to ban Corey Peterson because it's like talking to Cardi B about quantum mechanics. People like Corey Peterson can't figure it out, and that's okay. Everything is not for everyone, right? High-level theology and philosophy is not for everyone, right? Maybe his calling in life is just putting fries in the bag. And again, that's fine. Not everything is for everyone. Guys, I love you. Like I always tell you, stay safe. If you have any questions, hit the icon at the bottom of the screen, request to join. Come on up and be live for about another 10 minutes. Let's talk about the balloon argument and whether or not the Christian God is actually dependent upon the God of theistic essentialism. Also, if you are unfamiliar with theistic essentialism is a modern form of deism rather. It's the only religion on planet Earth that's solely based on the objective laws and the objective principles of logic. It's not a faith-based religion. Some famous deists you may have heard of: Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, Neil Armstrong, Voltaire, Albert Einstein was a deist. Again, I always tell people, look, there's nothing wrong with having faith, but you should never make faith-based claims because faith-based claims don't have any power. They're unfalsifiable. So what that means is if you have an idea or a thought or a belief, I want you to put them up into the principles of logic. If the principles of logic kick them out, then I want you to throw those ideas away because you can know that they're nonsensical. But if the principles of logic show you that your ideas are sound, well, then at that point I want you to hold on to them very dearly. Aren't you afraid atheists are going to take part of this argument and run with it? No, because this argument proves that the greatest conceivable being, the uncreated creator, and the God of theistic essentialism must necessarily exist. Therefore, an atheist would not be able to use the balloon argument at all. This is actually an argument against Christianity. Now, again, if you have any questions, request to join in the box coming up. A lot of my arguments and work that are not as famous as the Elliott argument have not been pushed out there. So sometimes I like to have live streams where we talk about some of these other arguments just for fun. To help broaden your guys' horizons and add knowledge to where you may be lacking, or maybe you just want some in this specific area. Once again, guys, I'll be live for about let's do about 5 more minutes. If no one requests to join or get in the box, we're going to turn it off, and then we'll go live again in about another hour. Verse, what's going on, buddy? That's right. The true God of the universe is immutable. He's the greatest conceivable being. He can't get better and he can't get worse. He can't get maximized because he's already the greatest conceivable being. So he can't be increased, I mean. And he can't be minimized because you can't knock him down. You can't knock him down a peg because then at that point he wouldn't be the greatest conceivable being anymore. Why don't you debate big atheist TikTokers? This argument seems bulletproof. Well, this argument actually is one of my, I call them one of my B arguments. Okay? This is not one of my. Whoops. I think I cut out. Like I was saying, there's not a single reputable atheist on this planet who will debate me live one-on-one on a neutral site with rules and moderators in a professional format where both parties get an equal amount of time to talk on the topic of the Elliott argument. There's not a single one. And the reason for that is my work is undefeated. It's irrefutable. And there's not an atheist out there who's willing to put their reputation on the line against me. Now, you're more than welcome to prove me wrong. Matter of fact, if you can prove me wrong, I'll pay you money. But I don't think you can, because it's my claim that there is not a single atheist in the world who will debate me. The CG is the Christian God, and the GCB is the greatest conceivable being, the God of theistic essentialism, better known as the uncreated creator. The Christian God is weak. He's pathetic. He's silly. He exists for adults that have poor logic and emotional problems. But that would be in accordance, in a line, that would be in alignment because the Christian God is the same way. He's not immutable. He changes. He interacts with people and circumstance and situations. He has emotions. He gets weak, tired, jealous, angry. He has wrath. He has love. He has all these things. Right? Now what this proves is that the Christian God could not even exist without the God of theistic essentialism. It means that the Christian God's existence is contingent upon the greatest conceivable being. I forgot pathetic. Man saved, you were right. Also pathetic. Also, this is, I think this is the first time that I've ever talked about the balloon argument on TikTok. So what generally happens is when I show my work, within the next week or so, you'll start seeing people plagiarize it. And they'll pass it off as their own. They'll change the name. They won't give me any credit. And they'll act like they're the one who created the argument. So please, do me a favor. If you ever see anyone using this argument, let them know. Hey man, Chad Elliott said, it's fine if you use the work. Just don't plagiarize them. Just give them credit, and also make sure that you use the argument correctly. All right, if you don't know how to use the argument, ask me some questions, DM me, I'll teach you how to use it, and then I have no problem with you using it. Just stop stealing my work. The GCB is the greatest conceivable being, better known as the uncreated creator or the God of theistic essentialism. What are some other emotions that the Christian God has? Wrath, right? Love, anger, regret. Regret is one of my favorite ones. Remember when God creates everything and he looks out over the entire creation and he says, everything that I created, it's perfect. It's great. I love it, basically. And then a few chapters later, he says, man, you know what? Scratch that. I regret making all this. Matter of fact, I regret it so much that it grieves me to my heart. So the Christian God clearly can change. He's not immutable. He can get grieved to his heart. He can get sad. He can get angry. He has wrath, all these different emotions. The God of theistic essentialism, on the other hand, is emotionless. He has no emotions. because he's the one true living God of the universe. He looks at the Christian God and says, buddy, you're weak. Hold my beer, little buddy. What's wrong with you? Also, the Christian God says crazy, logically absurd, incoherent shit like, I can only provide salvation and atonement for sin and forgiveness if I have a special sinless blood sacrifice. The God of theistic essentialism looks at him and says, hey, buddy, what's wrong with you? Are you having a mental breakdown? It'd be like if I asked you, hey, man, can you tie your shoes? And you said, you know, Chad, the only way I can tie my shoes is if I drink a glass of blood. I'd be like, buddy, what the hell? And then you ask me if I can tie my shoes, and I say, sure, no problem, watch this. And then I just tie my shoes. Who would be more powerful, me or you? Obviously me. Because that's part of the definition of being all-powerful, is being able to do the action without any antecedent determining factors or conditions. Without any requirements needing to be met, I can perform the action, but you can only do it if you drink some blood. I don't know if you have any children, but let's imagine that your kids did something bad. And they're upstairs in their room, and your kid said, hey, Dad, can you forgive us and let us out of our room now? And then you said, nah, sorry, kids. The only way Dad can forgive you is if I sacrifice myself. The kids would say, hey, Dad, what's wrong with you? Are you having a mental breakdown? Because the fact is, you could just simply forgive them. Oh, you don't need to sacrifice anyone. Christianity is like a weird, absurd blood cult. That's all it is. It's a blood cult. It's like a weird episode of Twilight or some weird episode of Dracula. Right? The true God of the universe doesn't need any fucking blood. He doesn't need a sacrifice. These are outdated, absurd, logically incoherent positions of Abrahamic religions, traditional religions, Christianity, etc. Guys, I'm going to cut it off unless someone requests to join and get in the box. Come on up. Let's talk about this argument. I'd like to hear your opinions and your thoughts. Also, I want to remind you that the Elliott argument is still for sale for just $7 for the rest of this week. You can get it on Amazon. I think it's 313 pages now. You can order the e-version if you want to start reading it right away today on your phone, your tablet, or your laptop. Get that good old e-version. Or you can order yourself a copy of the paperback version, and it will get delivered to your house in just a couple of days. If you're like me, you like to have a physical copy of the book in your hand that you're always reading. We got Cabbage in the house. What's going on? We got Verse. Corey P, I don't know if you're still in here. All you guys, appreciate you. Also, again, guys, it's one of my backup pages, so if you would, double tap the screen. See if we can't get the likes up. And share the live stream to as many people as you can who like this type of content. Let's try to get someone in the box real quick. Get a little bit of content. If not, I'm going to cut it off and I'll go live a little bit later. Saved. I appreciate the likes, my man. Let's read this one more time. The Christian God is emotional, while the greatest conceivable being is emotionless. Premise number 2. If the Christian God existed, it would be contingent on the greatest conceivable being as a necessary foundation for it to have emotions. Conclusion: the Christian God's existence is contingent upon the existence of the greatest conceivable being. This shows that Christianity wouldn't even exist without theistic essentialism. Jesus, the Christian God, all these failed ideas, they wouldn't even be allowed to be a thought in your mind without the God of theistic essentialism. The God of theistic essentialism is the one true, actual living God of the universe, the uncreated creator, the greatest conceivable being. All right, fellas, I love you. Interesting, Christian God has emotions in an indirect way. It's teaching humans to be controlled. Exactly. Hey, guys, I love you. Again, stay safe out there. Stay away from these lunatic Christians and these lunatic atheists. And like I always tell you, it's never goodbye. No, it's always, I'll see you later. What is the balloon argument, Corey? Corey, come on up, man. You see the balloon argument right here in the back. This is the balloon. Oh, you said, why is it called the balloon argument? My bad, brother. I misread your question. I'll tell you why it's called the balloon argument. Hold on one second. It's because of the thought experiment that we use and the example that we use to support the argument. For example, Corey, watch this. Let's talk about a balloon floating in the air. You follow me? Corey, a balloon floating in the air. It moves when the wind blows. It changes directions. It goes up and down. It spins around, etc. But what makes the balloon move like this? Well, it's the air. It's the space. It's the wind around it. The balloon can't move on its own without something bigger than it or more stable already existing. Meaning the balloon's movement is contingent. And just like the balloon needs air to move, a God with emotions needs something bigger, steady, and unchanging to ground these possibilities. Whoops. Hopefully you got that, Corey. Let's see if he has any more questions real quick. Did you have any more questions, brother? Otherwise, I'm going to cut it off. All right, my man. Take it easy, fellas. I'll be back a little bit later.